received enough sleep. She was his mother after all. Hello, can you hear me? A voice whispered into his mind. Ash's eyes snapped open at the sudden mental intrusion. Tiredness almost forgotten in his shock, he bolted upright in his bed and quickly scanned his room. No one. There was no one in his room, but then where did that voice come from? Hello. Please answer me. The voice shouted. It held a frantic note to it. Little Ash's eyes widened in the darkness. He could hear the voice perfectly clear, but there was no one but himself in the room. Hello. He spoke up hesitantly. Thank Arceus. You can hear me. Please child, I need your help, the voice continued. Ash stuttered. Who are you? He asked, rather afraid of the disembodied voice. I'm Lucario, but who I am is not important right now, child. I'm desperately in need of your help, Lucario continued with a grim edge to his voice. Ash gulped in uncertainty. What do you need my help for? I'm trapped, dear child. I've been sealed away for who knows how long and I cannot escape without your help, was the curt reply. Ash was still uncertain. How do I know you haven't been sealed away, as you put it with good reason? What if you did something bad and was sealed away for some kind of crime? And why do you specifically need my help? Why can no one else help you? He questioned, now more sure of himself. My master betrayed me, dear child, and sealed me away into his staff for unknown reasons. I did nothing to warrant this imprisonment, at least not to my knowledge. As for why I need your help specifically. Well child, you're special. You have a power that's extremely similar to my master's power. This power is called aura and yours is nearly identical to my master's. Only his aura, or yours in this case, can set me free, Lucario explained patiently. How do I know you're not lying? Ash questioned skeptically. You can't. You'll just have to take my word for it, the disembodied voice replied. Ash hesitated. He had no way of knowing if this, Lucario, was telling the truth, but on the other hand, if he was telling the truth, Ash didn't think he would be able to live with the guilt of abandoning him in his hour of need. It all came down to the fact if Ash would be able to throw caution to the wind. He thought for about a little less than a second. All right, I'll do it, Ash answered resolutely. Ash could suddenly feel an immense surge of joy and relief from the voice. Bless you, dear child. What do I need to do? Ash questioned as he crawled out of bed. He took his clothes from a nearby chair and began putting them back on. I need you to return to Cameron Palace and get close enough to my master's staff in order for me to draw the needed aura from you in order to escape. Don't inform your mother. She might try to stop you. I'll guide you back to the castle. Simple. Ash suddenly froze as he was about to put on his shirt. His master's staff. He knew of only one staff. He couldn't mean, your master wouldn't be Sir Aaron, would it? Well, yes. My master is, or was, Sir Aaron. He isn't my master anymore. He said so himself mere moments before he sealed me. I'm not really sure how to tell you this, but Sir Aaron died 700 years ago. You have been sealed for at least 700 years, Ash spoke up hesitantly. Silence. Ash could feel total and utter shock from Lucario over their mental connection. Ash put on the remainder of his clothes and patiently waited for Lucario to speak. While you're traveling to Cameron Palace, could you please inform me of what has happened with the world since I've been sealed? I dearly need to know what happened to Sir Aaron and how Cameron Palace managed to survive the impending battle that had threatened to destroy our kingdom, Lucario spoke up after a long moment of stunned silence. Ash nodded and prepared to leave. Sure, my mother told me story of the Aura Guardian Sir Aaron and how he saved the kingdom of Cameron, he said as he tiptoed out of his room. He quickly snuck past his mother's room and rushed out of the hotel. To his luck, the reception area was completely devoid of any people, making it easy for Ash to sneak out. He quickly took off towards Cameron Palace, all the while informing Lucario of what he knew. Lucario's sealed form sagged as the enormity of the situation dawned on him. 700 years, the Aura Pokémon softly murmured. His once master was long dead. Everyone he had once known were long dead. Nearly everything he cherished was long gone. Only Cameron Palace and the royal line of the kingdom remained to bind him to his past. What am I supposed to do with my life now? He questioned himself. He could once again pledge his allegiance to the royal house of Cameron, but everything would be different now. From what he could gather from what Ash had told him, the world was a lot calmer now. Wars were rare and almost never happened anymore. Big bands of mercenaries that wreaked havoc everywhere in his time no longer existed. Humanity in general was a lot more peaceful than they were in the past. The unsavory elements of society, while certainly still there, had been more or less tamed. The kingdom of Cameron no longer needed protection. The child, Ash, he even had a name similar to his long-dead former master. A part of him mused on how many more coincidences he would run into with the child had been most enlightening. Ash had told him the legend surrounding the death of his former master and how he had presumably saved the kingdom of Cameron. One part of him felt disgusted that his traitor of a former master was heralded as a hero, but on the other hand a part of him wanted nothing more than to believe the legend. Maybe, just maybe, Sir Aaron hadn't betrayed his trust and had sealed him away with good intentions. He was still very angry and bitter at his former master, but there was an underlying emotion under it now. It grew stronger with every moment. Hope. Hope that his former master had indeed been loyal until the end. Hope that his former master had indeed respected him as his student. And hope that his former master had indeed regarded them as friends. He resolved to travel to the Tree of Beginning as soon as possible. The legend said that Sir Aaron sacrificed himself to save Cameron and he gave his life in the Tree of Beginning to make it happen. Maybe he could find answers there. But first he needed to be freed. He had guided Ash back to the castle, his mental voice steering him through secret passageways that were thankfully still there after 700 years. This allowed the child to circumvent certain protections and checkpoints and allowed the child to make record time to the castle. Lucario smiled as Ash entered the room where the staff that held him was being kept. He would be free soon. Ash looked around nervously, scanning the small and dark room for any threats. He had returned as fast as he could to the castle, Lucario guiding his path and making quick time. Once inside the castle, Lucario had instructed him to take several back doors to where he was being kept. He had stuck to the shadows the entire trip. It wouldn't do to be spotted. It took him almost an hour to reach Lucario. Finally, after traveling so long alone in the dark, he found himself in a dark room in some closed-off part of the castle. There were shiny objects all around him. Each piece of jewelry was probably worth a lot, Ash mused. Before him laid Sir Aaron's staff. It was laid down horizontally on a small dais. Ash hesitantly took a step towards it. Don't be afraid, Ash, Lucario's mental voice whispered into his mind. There are no protections around the staff itself. It's safe, trust me. Reassured by Lucario's words, Ash walked up to the dais. He paused when he was in front of it, unsure of what to do. Grasp it, I'll do the rest. Be warned, though. This won't hurt, but it might be tiring. Ash nodded and after a moment's hesitation he firmly grasped the staff, his hands coming to rest on the polished wood. Immediately Ash could feel energy draining out of him. It was weird feeling, he mused, but not harmful. 5 minutes later Ash's eyes had trouble remaining open. His aura was still being sucked into the staff and up into the gem that was now shining brightly in a canopy of lights, shining brightly in the dark room. Just a little more, Ash's sleep-addled mind was only barely able to hear Lucario's muttered words. In a bright flash of white light a lance of energy sprang from the gem and struck the ground behind Ash. It quickly materialized in the form of Lucario, who grinned as he was finally freed. Ash's eyes finally shut as his body gave up. He went out like a light and started falling to the floor, his hands slipping from the polished wood of the staff. Lucario caught him with time to spare and picked Ash up. He cradled the small child in his arms. Thank you, Ash, the newly freed Pokémon muttered with his aura voice, which echoed lightly in the room. Ash hadn't heard what Lucario had said. He was sleeping deeply as he snored softly. Naturally seeking out the warmth of Lucario's fur, Ash actually snuggled as deep as he could into Lucario's chest. Said Pokémon paused and shook his head. This was new, he mused. A child clinging to him like he was a pillow. Lucario shifted Ash in his arms to make him more comfortable and took off running in a swift sprint, leaving the room behind and quickly running through the passageways and corridors of the castle. With his phenomenal speed he came outside on the castle's courtyard within a minute. He maintained his speed and quickly left the castle grounds before anyone saw them. Delia yawned and got out of bed. She glanced over to the clock that hung above her bed in her luxurious hotel room and noted that it was 11 o'clock already. Normally, she would have been up much earlier, but it had been quite late last night. She was also quite sure that Ash was still snoring away in his room. She giggled. Her child was a very, very deep sleeper. She walked out of her room, still yawning, and made for the kitchen. She entered the small room and was about to make herself breakfast until she spotted something surprising. Ash was already sitting at the dinner table. He smiled at her, but he looked extremely tired. There were small bags under his eyes and he leaned on the dinner table, as if he was too tired to sit up straight. He yawned deeply as he wished her good morning. Delia felt a stab of guilt. Maybe they shouldn't have stayed up so late last night. She softly murmured as she approached her child. If you're still tired, you can go back to bed if you want, sweetie. Ash smiled tiredly at her but shook his head. I need to tell you something first, Mom. Could you please sit down? I don't think you're gonna like what I'm about to tell you. Delia felt a spike of worry at her child's words. She still heeded them and took a seat across from him. She looked at him with worried eyes. Ash smiled at his mother. Relax, Mom. I'm perfectly fine, just a bit tired. He took a deep breath as he started to explain. Mom, last night, someone came to me asking for help. Immediately spotting the widening of his mother's eyes, he hurried to explain. Don't get me wrong, Mom. He didn't actually break into our hotel room or anything. He just. You know what, since I know you're not gonna believe it, I'll be blunt about it. He made a telepathic connection with me and asked for my help from far, far away. His mother's brow twitched. Of course I'm not going to believe that. It's ridiculous and not to mention impossible. Is that so? A strong telepathic voice suddenly echoed in her head. Delia's eyes nearly popped out of her skull as her eyes widened to an unnatural degree. Lucario stopped leaning against the wall of the kitchen and walked towards the table. He placed his paw on Delia's shoulder and went to stand to the side so that both Ash and Delia could see him without problems. Who are you? Delia asked, stuttering in sudden fear. My name is Lucario. I'm the one who asked your son for help last night, the Aura Pokemon replied while frowning at Delia's apparent fear of him. He had switched from his telepathic speech to his aura voice. Delia seemed to gather herself and gave Lucario a hard look. Said Pokemon was impressed at how fast the mother was able to rally herself. And why, do tell me, did you need my son's help in the middle of the night? She asked, a rather hard edge to her voice. Do you mind if I take a seat first? This is going to be a rather long and complicated story to tell, Lucario said, looking her directly in the eyes. He was even more impressed when Delia didn't even flinch from his scarlet-eyed gaze. Quite a lot of people he had encountered in his own time were afraid to look him in the eyes. His deep red eyes spooked them. Delia nodded after a moment of thought. Lucario gave a reassuring nod at the mother and took a seat at the table. He shot a glance at Ash and then turned to look seriously at Delia. The short version is that my master sealed me into his staff 700 years ago. And your son was the only one with a power similar enough to my former master's power to be able to free me. You already know of my former master. His name was Sir Aaron. Delia gasped, recognition sparking in her eyes. My story began 700 years ago. You actually know a part of it already. Ash told me you read the tale of the Aura Guardian Sir Aaron to him before you came here. Anyways, Sir Aaron was actually my master and teacher in the ways of the Aura. Lucario paused for a moment to gather his thoughts before continuing. The tale you've read portrays my former master as a hero who sacrificed himself in order to save Cameron from the impending battle of two armies who were mere moments away from clashing and destroying everything around them. Delia swiftly cut in. And you're telling me that story is false? Lucario paused before answering. I'm truly not sure. You see, my former master had fled Cameron Palace, leaving Queen Rin behind. I caught up to him as he was traveling towards the Tree of Beginning and questioned what he was doing. He didn't answer me and denounced me as his student, saying that he wasn't my master anymore. He left me behind as he continued on to the Tree of Beginning. I followed, of course, only for him to seal me into his staff for unknown reasons. Both Delia and Ash frowned. Delia because she simply didn't like the fact that a story that she loved might not be true. And Ash because he looked up to Sir Aaron. His legend portrayed what a real hero should be, selfless and noble. But if what Lucario said was true, and Ash was inclined to believe his words, then he might just have been a coward who had opted to flee instead of staying to fight. He didn't like it one bit. I tried to free myself last night at the ball, but the staff holding me was taken from the room before I was able to draw enough aura from Ash in order to escape. Luckily, I know a technique that allows me to speak to people over long distances. I contacted Ash and convinced him to help him. I guided him back to the castle where he freed me. Then, I carried him back here, and since I thought that you two deserved an explanation, I stayed to explain things to you, Lucario finished, looking seriously at Delia. How do I know you're telling the truth? Lucario snorted, feeling a sense of deja vu. Ash can tell you. He released me from Sir Aaron's staff, the staff you saw yesterday at the ball. That should be proof enough. The mother's eyes turned to Ash, who nodded sleepily at his mother. It's true, Mom. Delia's eyes narrowed at Lucario. Now that you're free, what are you going to do? She questioned sharply. I'm gonna go to the Tree of Beginning to find out the truth. I need to know if Sir Aaron did indeed betray me or that his legend is true after all, Lucario answered curtly. Ash suddenly cut in. When are you leaving? As soon as we're done talking, I'll set out. Delia frowned. Don't you need to prepare provisions first? No, Lucario answered flatly. I take what I need from the land. Ash smiled sleepily. I wish you the best of luck, Lucario, he said, as his eyelids started dropping. He was close to falling asleep. Go to bed, Ash. You need to sleep and recover, Lucario said, his aura voice betraying his concern. Delia nodded and got up to escort her son to his room. Ash didn't protest and was swiftly herded to his bed where he almost immediately fell asleep. Lucario spoke as Delia returned to the kitchen. I owe your son my freedom, he said quietly. How long will you be staying? Delia frowned in thought. We'll return to Pallet Town in 8 days. If I return in time, I'll teach him how to reach his aura, Lucario said, looking into the distance. He deserves to be able to use his gift. Delia looked concerned. It's not dangerous, is it? Lucario shook his head and stood up from his chair. No, it's his own energy. It can't harm him. He walked towards one of the wide kitchen windows and opened it. I'm leaving now. I hope I'll be back before you leave. Not waiting for an answer, Lucario jumped out of the window. His immense strength carried him across the street as he flipped to land on a roof. He landed and took off running over the rooftops. His eyes locked with his goal. The massive shadow of the Tree of Beginning. It was barely visible in the distance as it was obscured by the morning mist. It was going to be a tiring journey, he knew. But he needed to do this. In order to set his own doubts to rest. To see if his master had indeed betrayed him. 3 days. It had taken Lucario 3 days of non-stop traveling in order to reach his goal. 3 days of traveling through rugged valleys and hills. Then up the gigantic structure that was known as the Tree of Beginning. He could now say one thing with absolute certainty. The tales didn't do justice to the beauty of the Tree of Beginning. Lucario came rushing out of a tunnel and entered the core of the Tree of Beginning. The sight took his breath away. All over the room gigantic blue crystals sprouted out of the strange green segmented walls and the smooth glass-like floor to curve up and to come together above the centerpiece of the room. In the middle of the room was a giant, crystalline structure that looked almost like a blossoming flower. Bright blue energy pulsed upwards out of it and up into the surface of the Tree of Beginning, giving the tree its power. Lucario could feel the immense power flowing from it. His aura senses screamed at him, nearly overloading at being in the presence of this immense and all-consuming power. He took a hesitant step forwards, but froze almost immediately. Sir Aaron's gloves, carrying the mark of the Aura Guardian, hung from one of the smaller crystals that made up the structure in the center of the room. He quickly walked towards it and kneeled down to get a better look at them. Could it be? Lucario whispered out loud. These are his gloves, but... He trailed off as he touched the gloves resting over the crystals, looking up at the large mound of crystals beside the small ones. He stared at it for a moment. Sir Aaron. Lucario raised his paw and formed an aura sphere. A distinctly human shape trapped within the crystals responded to it, glowing the same color and becoming visible. It is you, Lucario whispered. He almost didn't believe his eyes. Lucario allowed his aura sphere to dissipate and placed his paw back on the ground, accidentally nudging a time flower. A time flower is a crystallized flower that grows in and around the tree of beginning. It has the ability to record events and play them at a later date as a holographic image along with sound, if it's stimulated by the right aura. He looked down, surprised. The time flower twisted open and released an orb of light. The orb of light abruptly expanded to cover the room, overlapping the room with a black and white view, giving Lucario a glimpse into the past. Lucario knew he had just activated a time flower. He had a feeling that all his questions were about to be answered. Sir Aaron came rushing into the cavern, his cape billowing behind him in his haste. Mew. I know you're here. Show yourself, Mew. I need your help. Lucario's ears twitched as he heard the high-pitched and haunting call of a bird. He looked up, and spotted, to his surprise, a black and white image of Ho-Oh perched on one of the gigantic crystals that dotted the cavern. Its body glowed for a split second before it shifted into the much smaller form of Mew. Mew flew down and came to rest in front of the visually relieved Sir Aaron. Mew, I realize that you and this tree are one. This fighting has shifted the power of the tree, and I know you can set it right, but you need help. Please, take my aura, and save the people, the memory of Sir Aaron said and stretched out his arm towards the memory of Mew. Mew, the small legendary nodded and cooed at Sir Aaron. An aura sphere appeared in front of his hand. The crystals on his gloves shimmered with the focused energy. Lucario knew what he was about to witness. Sir Aaron's death. The power of aura will prevail. Sir Aaron shouted. His body pulsed and shook with the energy that he was forcing away from his body and into Mew. Sir Aaron's aura sphere grew and surrounded Mew. Lucario cringed. He knew what Sir Aaron was doing. He was giving all his aura to Mew, forfeiting his life in the process. Ah! Sir Aaron's final yell of exertion echoed throughout the cavern as Mew's energy exploded outwards. Sir Aaron! Lucario yelled. He grasped towards the memory of his former master. The memory abruptly vanished. Lucario was shocked into motionlessness. His paw grasped nothing but empty air. After a moment he numbly lowered it. The aura Pokémon turned to look at the animated and trapped form of Sir Aaron. Sorrow and regret filled him. Tears gathered in his eyes. His master had indeed given his life to save the kingdom just like the legend had said, and he, the very own student of Sir Aaron, had believed the man to be a traitor and a coward who had abandoned him. It was inexcusable. Forgive me for ever doubting you, Master. Lucario's aura voice came out as nothing more than a whimper. He slumped as tears streamed like two tiny rivers from his eyes. Droplets fell towards the smooth and glass-like floor of the chamber. He choked and sobbed softly. His grief was overpowering. It was because of this that he didn't notice the tiny, but extremely powerful presence that had just appeared behind him, until it spoke. Don't be sad, it whispered into his mind. Lucario's head came up and snapped around. His scarlet eyes widened as he took in the physical representation of the tree of beginning, Mew. Mew floated towards him. The mighty being's eyes were stained with sorrow as it regarded Lucario. Your master died a hero. He gave his life to save the tree and the people he was sworn to protect. It was a fitting end for a man as honorable as Sir Aaron, Mew said. Her mental voice echoed in Lucario's mind. I believed him to be a traitor. I believed him to be a coward. I hated him. I despised him. How could I have possibly doubted the man who took me in and trained me into a mighty warrior? How can I ever forgive myself? Lucario's aura voice dropped into a whisper. How can I ever attain my master's forgiveness? Mew smiled. An expression filled with childish innocence. You don't need to attain forgiveness, Lucario. Your master cared for you like few people could ever hope to care for another. He would forgive you in a heartbeat. How do you know that? Lucario whispered demurely. Mew pointed with one of her stubby arms towards the side, towards another time flower. Find out for yourself. Lucario hesitantly removed his eyes from Mew and looked at the time flower. He walked up to it and dropped into a crouch in front of it. Lightly tapping it with his paw, he activated it. The time flower twisted open and a ball of light floated up out of it. It quickly expanded to cover the room and began to play the recorded memory. Directly besides Lucario, the memory of Sir Aaron slumped to the ground. He took his gloves off of his hands and laid them onto the crystals where Lucario had found them. Sir Aaron leaned back against the crystal. His body glowed a sickly muted green and waves of energy surrounded him as his life bled away. Sir Aaron struggled with the pain for a moment, before looking off into the distance, a sad expression on his face. Lucario, forgive me. To Lucario, it almost felt as if Sir Aaron was speaking to him in the same time and space. The time didn't really matter though, his words were heard and acknowledged all the same. I forgive you, Master. Please understand, I had to seal you inside of the staff, Sir Aaron continued, as if he knew that Lucario would one day stumble onto that very time flower to find the memory. Maybe he had. I knew that if I didn't, you would follow me here and suffer the same fate. I only wish you could have known the real story. Lucario was crying again. I understand. One day, someone will release you from that staff. In a distant and more peaceful time. I wonder what it'll be like. He smiled as he looked up. I wonder if, he groaned in anguish, cutting of his words. Lucario clenched his fists. He wished, oh how he wished that he had been there with his master in his final moments. I have no regrets, Sir Aaron said. My journey has been good. I served a beautiful queen, and you and I shared many adventures. He closed his eyes with a smile on his face. Those memories will always be with me. Master, Lucario whispered. He was shaking with tears. If only you could hear me. I want to tell you how much you mean to me. Farewell Lucario, Aaron said, the smile never leaving his face. You were more to me than just my student, you are my closest friend. I feel the same, Lucario choked out. It could be. Quote. Sir Aaron said as he opened his eyes. They were clouded with tears, that one day, we will see each other again. He closed his eyes. A single tear fell down his cheek, but his smile never faded. But, before that, I want you to have more adventures with new people, to live life to its fullest. I hope so, my friend. Sir Aaron faded away as he became one with the tree of beginning, his body becoming a part of the crystals that gave the tree its power. In a flash of light, the memory vanished. Lucario couldn't stop his tears from falling. His master and friend deserved the tears he was shedding. He sobbed as he knelt in front of the place where Aaron was trapped. Sir Aaron, my friend, I'm sorry I let you down. You haven't let him down, Mew whispered into Lucario's mind. He knew perfectly well that you would be hurt and confused by his actions. That's why he left that message for you. This just proves how much he cared for you. Mew looked down at Lucario and smiled. Honor his memory, Lucario. Live your life and be happy. But how am I supposed to do that? I've nothing left. Nothing to live my life for. What am I supposed to do with myself? Lucario murmured as he looked up to Mew imploringly. Mew gave Lucario an earnest look with her deep and expressive blue eyes. You have indeed felt a great loss, Lucario. But the friendships and the bonds you've made with Sir Aaron and the people back in your own time haven't disappeared. The affection you felt for them is still there inside of you, and you can use that affection to make new bonds and friendships. I believe you've already started to make a new bond with someone. Ash, Lucario whispered as he stood upright. He felt empowered by Mew's words. That's right, Mew said with a nod of approval. He's already wormed himself a place in your heart, hasn't he? Don't answer, I can feel it. Mew's smile threatened to split her face in two. Go to him, Lucario. He'll be your first friend in this new world. Lucario nodded and smiled at Mew. He looked at Sir Aaron's form one last time and gave it a watery smile before snagging up his master's gloves and bolting from the chamber, leaving Mew behind. Mew gave one last smile at the retreating figure of Lucario. Look after him and make him strong, Lucario. He's gonna need all the help he can get. His station demands it. It took Lucario another 3 days of traveling to return to the town of Rota. It was rather late when he arrived. The sun was going down the horizon, bathing the world in a brilliant orange glow. The moment Lucario arrived at the city's outskirts, he closed his eyes and raised his arm, placing his palm in front of his chest spike. The aura is with me. He called out as he focused his aura, causing the black tube-like extensions on the back of his head to raise up into the air. His aura sight activated, allowing him to see half a mile into the city, aiding him in his search for Ash. It didn't even take half a minute for Lucario to find Ash. He was with his mother at the park in the center of the city. Ash was playing in the grass while Delia watched him fondly. He was happy to see that they were alone near a pond far away from the path and far away from any prying eyes. He took off running again, becoming nothing more than a blur to the people he passed as he shot through the town towards his goal. Lucario tightly clenched the paw that held Sir Aaron's gloves. He was still very sad and had cried a few times on his way back, but he refused to be drowned by his sorrow. He knew that Sir Aaron wanted him to move on with his life, and he would do just that. He would work through his sadness, he would make new friends, and he would make a new future and place for himself in this new world. Lucario swore to himself that he'd succeed. He would make Sir Aaron proud. Lucario arrived at the park in less than a minute. With his aura senses guiding him, Lucario quickly found Ash and Delia in the secluded part of the park. Smiling, he emerged from the tree line. He then slowly approached the mother and son. Both heard the soft crunch of the grass under Lucario's feet as he approached and turned to look at him. Their eyes widened in surprise and Ash got a wild grin on his face. The grin grew wider as he got up from the grass. Lucario, you're back, he nearly shouted as he ran up to Lucario. Delia followed behind, also looking happy to see the aura Pokemon again. Well, how'd it go? Delia asked, referring to his quest to uncover the truth regarding his master. The aura Pokemon smiled, an expression that surprised Ash and Delia. I'm glad to say that my assumptions were wrong. Ash gained a glint in his eyes. So he really was a hero. Lucario nodded. Yes, he was the greatest hero there ever was. The legend is completely true. Delia smiled. I guess you have quite a story to tell. Care to share it? Lucario snorted and smiled back at her. I would love to, but first I want to rest a bit. Do you mind if I stay with you for the night? I'm very tired. Delia was surprised by the request but nodded nonetheless. Sure, you can stay with us. Just make sure no one sees you when we go back to hotel. People will be surprised to see a Pokemon suddenly staying with us. Not to mention that the hotel managers might make us pay extra if they know of you. Lucario nodded. Don't worry, I can be very stealthy when I want to be. No one will know I'm staying with you. Ash then noticed the gloves tightly clenched in Lucario's paws. Hey, Lucario. What are those? Lucario looked at what Ash was staring at and smiled at him. These are my master's gloves. They aided him with focusing his aura. Here, do you want to hold them? He asked as he held the gloves out for Ash to take. Ash took them with excitement practically vibrating through his entire frame. He ran his fingers over the silk-like material reverently. These really belong to Sir Aaron. He whispered. Lucario's smile grew. They certainly did. If you take good care of them, I'll even let you keep them. Ash's head snapped up. His eyes were gleaming. Really? Yes, Lucario said simply. Delia looked at her watch. It's getting late. We should start heading back to the hotel, she said and took Ash's hand in her own. And Lucar. You won't even notice I'm there, Lucario assured. Delia nodded and started making her way out of the park, tugging Ash along with her. Lucario followed, melting into the shadows as he followed behind. So, let me get this straight, Ash said dryly. He was staring incredulously at Lucario, who looked calmly back at him from the other end of the kitchen table. You went to Tree of Beginning, where you found these time flowers that can record moments in history. From these, you found out that Sir Aaron had indeed sacrificed his life to save Cameron Palace and Rhoda with help from Mew. The Mew. Mew comforted you, and then you came back here. Lucario nodded with a straight face. Exactly. Ash snorted. The story sounding completely ridiculous. If you were human, I would have never believed that story in 1,000 years. The aura Pokemon cocked his brow. Oh, how come? Delia giggled from her seat at the table and answered for her son. It's just that what you've described is rather hard to believe. Really, what you've just told us sounds like the plot of a drama movie. Lucario blinked. What's a movie? Ash grinned. We've got to show you a movie sometimes. Believe me, you'd love it. Lucario shook his head, dispelling his thoughts before looking Ash in the eyes. Tell me, Ash. Did your mother tell you of the offer I made if I came back in time? Ash's grin grew so much that it nearly split his face in half. You mean the one where you promised to teach me how to use my aura? He said excitedly. Lucario nodded. Yes, that one. He took a deep breath and calmed himself. This was it. One thing you need to understand, Ash, is that learning how to control aura takes years of effort. The best I'd be able to teach you before you leave is how to feel its presence and how to access it. Anything else would take too much time. Ash frowned at that. Really? What a bummer. Lucario hesitated for a brief moment before steeling himself and making his proposition. Ash, I'm more than willing to teach you all there is to know about aura, but that will take time. Time that we do not have. If I stay here, that is. Ash and Delia shot him a confused look at his last remark. He took a deep breath before speaking quietly. There's nothing here for me anymore, Ash. Everything I once knew is long gone. If it's all right with you and your mother, I would like to come with you. It would give me a chance to start over in a new place while also giving you the chance to learn how to control your aura. Ash's eyes bugged out in surprise. Delia gasped, equally as surprised as her son. Why you would do that for me? Ash stuttered. Lucario smiled lightly. I like you, Ash, and I would love to pass on my knowledge of aura. Besides, this is my chance to start over. It's a win-win situation for me. Ash turned to look at his mother pleadingly. In the end, she was the one who would get final say if Lucario was to be allowed to come with them. He hoped with all his heart that she would say yes to Lucario's proposition. Delia hummed in thought. Lucario's proposition had thrown her for a loop, but she gave it honest thought. Whenever she was faced with a difficult choice, she liked to make a mental list of advantages and disadvantages of either possible option. Immediately the advantages of accepting Lucario's proposal sprung up to her. For one, it would teach Ash how to defend himself. Dealing with Pokémon could be dangerous at times, and with her son's ambition to become a Pokémon trainer, it would be very reassuring to know that her son could defend himself. In addition, aura was a part of him. He had the right to learn how to use it. On top of that, Delia knew that Lucario wouldn't need any upkeep or anything. He evidently knew how to take care of himself. She tried to think of any disadvantages, but came to a startling conclusion. There weren't any. The choice was easily made. Sure, why not? Delia said with a big grin. Thank you, Mom. The smile that blossomed on Ash's face lighting up the room. Lucario nodded thankfully at the mother, smiling. His eyes also became a bit moist as well. He raised a paw to rub them while steadfastly telling himself that he had something in his eyes. Something wrong, Lucario? Ash asked in concern. Are you crying? I've something that might help, he said as he took out a small leaf from his pocket. Lucario shook his head as he finished wiping his eyes. No, everything's all rig. He got cut of his Ash placed the leaf against his mouth and started playing. The soothing tones of Oración, perfectly played, echoed in the room. Lucario's eyes involuntarily dropped as the soothing tones washed over him. He sagged into his chair as the music relaxed him. All his sadness, residual anger and self-loathing for himself disappeared in an instant. All dark emotions vanished and were replaced by a feeling of peace and contentment. Delia closed her eyes and smiled as she listened intently to her son's song. She loved it. So much so that she insisted that her son played it to her at least once every 3 days. With one last high-pitched note, Ash finished the song and removed the leaf from his mouth. He smiled at the relaxed form of Lucario. All better now. Lucario's bright red eyes fluttered open. Wah, what was that? Oración, Ash answered. His smile widened. Calm that calms the mind and